Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan, also known as the Medieval Genie, and today we're talking about this, which is my best attempt at a Falcata, a Greek, I do believe, no, not Greek, Iberian, sorry, sort of Celt-Iberian type of sword, which tends to be a one-handed sword, single-edged, I think usually a bit longer than this. The particular example I've made is a 19-inch blade, which is the most I could stretch out of the material that I had. Excuse me, and it flares distinctly, usually more distinctly than this, at the top end, and it narrows at the bottom end with a bit of a flare just before it reaches the handle, which tends to be a bit more of an extreme curl than this, and also has a bit of a hook, sort of a hook going at the top as well, with occasionally a chain connecting a two, I think. So it's a bit different to what I've ended up with. So you'll see here I have a full tang handle. The wood is some strange bit I collected at a sort of recycling centre type of place. It might be some scrap mahogany or some other type of material like that, maybe walnut, or I'm not sure. I at first thought it was maybe some kind of darkened oak, but I hear that usually the darker colours of oak are stained that colour, but this of course is the colour all the way through that I've ground and polished. It was coarsely cut, so it didn't look like it was off some fancy piece of furniture, it was just an off-cut. So I am yet to find out what the wood is, but it's the opposite colour scheme to the other sword I had. I had copper pins, whereas now I have brass pins, and instead of an ash handle, this darker wood handle. So instead of brown pins on a yellow wood, it's brown wood with yellow pins. It's nice. It weighs just under a pound, so it is an extremely nimble sword. You know, for the fact that its point of balance is somewhere around here, so many inches in front of where the handle is, especially if you hold it towards the bottom. It's very forward weighted, yet because it's so light it does not sacrifice speed, which I'm quite happy with. So for things like various parry-apost actions, shortcuts and even chopping motions, it's really nimble, yet I feel it should cut well. I say it should because I haven't test cut with it yet. That will come in a future video. But I've sharpened it up best I can, especially on this flare where nearly all of the actual cutting will happen. To the people who are not used to me and my channel and all that, it should be noted that I have not fully hardened and tempered the entire length, because the sort of quenching bucket I have at the moment goes to about this far. So just as it's reaching the narrowest point of the blade, this and going further back is unhardened. Now, any decent blacksmith or bladesmith knows not to harden a tang, because then it could break during use and that will destroy the whole thing. But I should have tempered, heat treated the entire blade. It's only hardened about that far, and I did tempering. Just in case the quenching was happening further than where the oil was, I did a bit of tempering a few inches further along, just in case it did harden on those bits and I didn't want to make a weak spot. Especially since it's very scary. This is of course the narrowest part of the sword, and it doesn't have as much distal taper. The Langseax I made, which you'll see in other videos, that has a distal taper, so it starts at, I think it was 6.5mm thickness at the, just next to the handle, tapering down to about 2mm thickness right before the point. This is fairly consistent thickness all the way along, and then there's a taper slightly thinner in the last 3 inches or something. So it's going to be extremely important that this blade flexes and has spring to it, because if it doesn't, it will break. And this is something I'll need to test in the test cutting. I'll try not to be too reckless and abusive of it. But I'm happy with it. It's got a leaf-shaped point, and despite the fact that this style is normally worse, you know, for puncturing and penetration than you'd have on something like a Langseax that I've made, something that has a more gradual point. This, of course, is very fat and then suddenly tapers to a point. I feel like the way this has come out in its quality actually would thrust as good or maybe better than the Langseax, excluding, of course, the flex in the blade, but the actual point sharpness I think is better. So in some ways it has come out better. I've got a more consistent flat grind and a flat stock, so I was able to do more of the shaping in forging. It's a 19-inch blade instead of a 20-inch blade when I had much more material and much more weight in the old sword. And just in general it's come out better. One of the other features that I should mention is the tang does not have a distal taper in it. So you'll see it's basically a consistent thickness of steel all the way through. With the Langseax it had a distal taper because I wanted a bit more forward weight for a chop coming out of a more consistent breadth of blade. It doesn't really matter on this one because it's not as thick right at the tang area, whereas it was very thick stock coming towards the back of the other sword, and it's perfectly fine in its weight and balance anyway, and its distribution. So in terms of making this, with the shaping of the handle, I had basically got the blocks, drilled through, put the pins in, and after that I used the bandsaw to cut rough blocks and, you know, geometric shapes out so that it would be less effort doing other bits. Then after that I switched to my angle grinder using a sanding wheel, just using that for a more rough shape, and then once I was getting more confident of a general idea of what the handle should be like, I switched to a rough grit belt, 60 grit I think it was, on my belt sander, which gave it the shape that you see now, and then the polish that makes it look so smooth. If you see it close up, you'll see it almost might remind you of certain older kitchen knives and things. It's a very smooth finish for the fact that it was extremely coarse-grained wood. You can't see it other than the fact that the actual, I'll show you again, apart from the fact that the wood grain is showing through sometimes. See how close I can get it before it tries to defocus. Yeah, so some of the grain, you know, the actual wood grain itself might show up as it being coarse, but of course I've smoothed it over so when you feel it physically in the hand, it's as smooth as some forms of plastic. It just obviously feels a bit warmer because it insulates better. But yeah, I'm quite happy with it. It's come out nicely. I will probably varnish the handle, just like I did with the other sword, the Langseax, so then it can keep this and not get dirty and grimy, because I know I can't stop handling these things. So eventually it will get quite grubby. So I'll make sure to keep it nice looking. And yeah, that's that. I've done the sharpening, hardened, tempered, forged, everything, all from start to finish. It should be mentioned that when I forged these blades, so far they are not made using virgin steel. Now, if you've never heard that term, virgin steel just means, obviously, iron doesn't have sex. What actually happens is you get some, especially professional bladesmiths, who purchase steel for the purpose of making a sword. So it is something that is fresh, brand new material, and it has only ever served the purpose as the sword. Whereas in my case, because I don't want to yet, you know, spend professional amounts of money, I have used this spring steel of an unknown specific type from a leaf spring. So one of the reasons why I've struggled to make swords sometimes is that there were things like cracks and rust and deformations and problems, especially the cracks, which are the most horrible issue, you know, sometimes in the material itself, because it used to be part of a vehicle's suspension, and of course over the years of wear and tear, before it got thrown out to recycling and then ended up in my possession, it's ended up taking some strain, so there have been cracks and problems in the actual construction of the metal. And indeed, even sometimes when I'm looking at the bits of steel, one of the things I do is I actually do a sort of a rough polish at various stages after a day's forging. So I did it about 3 or 4 times with this one, because I'm regularly checking it. I don't want to spend a massive amount of time making an item when it turns out there are going to be cracks and problems and it'll just be destroyed. So I'm checking it, and also if there are fine minute cracks, I can grind them out before they become serious issues. I'm looking at this blade now, and there's a part of me is mildly terrified because there's a little line or something coming up along here. I'll see if I can show it close up. Yeah, the polish is causing reflection a lot, but there was just a tiny, slightly greyish line, and there is a sign that there may be some kind of, you know, some minor surface stress cracks. Luckily though, they seem to be going along the blade forwards like this, so that means that it's less likely to explode out and shatter the blade, whereas if I have cracks which are going forwards towards the edge, then obviously it's going to open up like a mouth as soon as I make an impact. With this, it'd be more like if I did a really awful edge alignment hit, like I did a flat slap. That might cause it to try to fold and break off, which I hope doesn't happen, because I put a lot of effort into this bloody thing, I'll tell you. About 3 days of just constant forging to stretch the metal out, hours of grinding, hours of, you know, getting the handle fitted, polished, gluing bits of it because it was a little bit rattly, squishing the pins a bit more to hold it tighter, stuff like that. Little adjustments here and there to make sure it was comfortable, lightweight, yet forward weighted, sharp, polished, looking good, acting good, all of these things. And I think actually when it comes to bottles, as long as I don't kind of do a flat slap on something, I think this should do even better than the Langseax did. So in the next video I will start showing that for you. So yeah, I'm glad you stuck around to listen, and since you've stuck around this far, by all means, if you want any particular designs tried out, I know somebody has already requested, I forgot the name of the sword now, but one that I might try experimenting. Oh yes, a yataghan. Someone wanted a yataghan made, which I might do at some point. If you have any other designs you want to see, then maybe eventually I'll get round to it. Obviously depending on the skills I've got. So that's that. See you later and have a good day. Iron doesn't have sex.